My special thanks to the HOD of the department, Dr. Premanand sir, and also Professor Pavita madam for inviting me for this particular session. My topic, today's topic for discussion in this FDP is image classification, particularly focusing on the machine learning approaches and also some aspects we are discussing in the deep learning approaches. Maybe the end of the session, probably we can have a small demonstration how we can implement this. I would like to start the session by a quote by Andrew Ng, the professor from the Stanford University and also the founder of Coursera, co-founder of the Coursera, also now running an organization called as deeplearning.ai. No one knows what the right algorithm is, but it gives us hope that if we can discover some crude approximation of whatever this algorithm is and implement it on computer, that can help us to make a lot of progress. So this code particularly stated upon all the problems that comes under machine learning. Any problem that we need to solve using machine learning, definitely we do not know the exact algorithm to solve it. So what we do particularly is we come out with some approximation, some methods to solve that particular problem. So definitely that particular approximation is not the ideal one, but definitely it will help us to so that as the more and more approximation algorithms comes into picture, our state of the art will be rich in that. So probably we are reaching a level where where the level which is very, very nearer to the ideal algorithm. My presentation outline will be as follows. Maybe 10 minutes, around 10 to 15 minutes, I'm just explaining what exactly the image classification algorithm is. Probably the main part of the presentation will lead with the machine learning approaches, why it is required and why it is important. Maybe the last part of the lecture, this particular session will be on deep learning approaches and some of the facts that we have to keep in mind. Of a particular task, maybe we can say that image classification. What exactly image classification is? The problem of image classification determines the identity of the image. It recognizes the image. What do you mean by recognition? Basically, what exactly it is there, that particular image belongs to which particular class, and or in other words, how we can label that particular image, that is nothing but the classification. Of course, it belongs to the class of supervised learning in machine learning. In broad sense, we can say that suppose it is given with an say image of a chair, an image of a chair. If you think the image classification system as a black box, so probably it gives an output as a chair. So this is nothing but the label, or also we call as a class, that this particular input image belongs to. For the computer, the input is just the matrix. So image is nothing but a matrix for the computer. It is nothing but some values. But ultimately, what is the output? It is nothing but the understanding of that particular input image. That is nothing but the label. So this is the image classification problem. What exactly we need for the image classification problem to be addressed? Suppose if at all we are developing an image classification system, what is required for us? For the image, to build up the image classification system, the most important thing that is required for developing the image classification system is we need to teach the system that how this need to be classified, how this input image need to be classified. So that is what in common terminology, in machine learning terminology, we call it as learning. For this particular learning, we need large amount of data. Large amount of data is required for the learning. So to teach the computer, we need the data set along with the labels. For example, if you consider here is a set of objects like bag, box, desk, pillow, sofa, and so on. So we need to give the images, as well as associated labels for that. Okay, so we need to give the labels as well as the images to understand, to develop a image classification system. So this is the most important thing or the preliminary thing that is required. Okay, now coming to the some of the applications of image classification, probably there are plenty number of applications we can find for image classification. I will take only few here. Biometrics, which is one of the everywhere we can see nowadays biometrics is used, maybe from attendance management system to our national level Aadhaar. Everywhere the biometrics is used. So probably you can see the biometrics is nothing but the face, iris, fingerprint, palm print. All these are the biometrics which is captured. So face recognition is one of the what we can say very popular application of the image processing and machine learning as concerned. So face recognition deals with the identifying the faces. So instead of image classification, we can now say that face classification. The another terminology for the classification is recognition. So most popular terminology that is used for face is face recognition. So apart from that, the face recognition, we can also see fingerprint-based recognition, iris-based recognition, palm print-based recognition. They are quite popular in the literature. And in commercial also, we can see that face recognition, fingerprint recognition, iris recognition, it is the commercial software is also available. Further, we can say that we can extend this to the objects. In and around us, there are many objects that are existing. So suppose if at all we want to recognize these objects automatically using a computer system, so that particular task can be called as object recognition. Handwritten digit recognition. So probably, of course, here it is just confined to the digits only. So we can see that here there are only 10 classes that are available. For each class, several images you can see. So these images, these data can be given as a training. And later stage, if at all I am writing, let us say some simple digit, and this is given to the image classification system, so probably the classification system will give the label as 3. This is an image 3, and this is the label 3. So like this, we can find many applications on image classification. So image classification is very important, plays an important role in many applications that we can see in day-to-day life. So apart from this, I also wanted to say, image classification plays a major role nowadays in the medical and healthcare. Many images that we are getting from the scanning, maybe the X-ray images, maybe the CT scan images, ultrasound images, MRI images, angiogram images. From all these images to analyze the image and to try to understand that particular images classification plays a wide role in the healthcare also. Now, what is the technical thing behind this image classification? What are the different components involved in the general architecture of the image classification system? Let us see it one by one. The first part, of course, as an end product, what we want is it is just one image classification system. It is a black box. That is what we want. Now, just give an input image, and it should give the label. So this is what the view of the image classification system as a black box. Now, going in depth, what exactly happens inside this image classification system? Probably we can see that the first phase that is required for the image classification system is training the system. To train the system, we need number of images. So let us say we have number of images for training. Once the number of images for training is available, then what exactly we need to do, the immediate step that is required is something called as pre-processing, which I am not listed here. Pre-processing is improving the quality of the images. Another important factor that is required is we need to extract the features from the images. So feature extraction, okay, feature extraction is another important step in the image classification. Once the features are extracted, if required, we need to go ahead with something called as dimensionality reduction. Let us discuss this in detail in the coming slides. So once the features are retrieved, and of course, if at all required, its dimensionality is reduced, then we can go for training the machine learning algorithm. Okay, so once the machine, so there are many algorithms that are available depending upon the applications. So some algorithm we can pick which will be suitable for our application, and this particular algorithm gives us a model. So this completes the training or learning phase. Once the model is available, using the testing samples, the same process is repeated till the feature extraction. Then that data is given as an input for some classifier. So sometimes the classifier is what we can say is classifier is dependent upon the machine learning algorithm, or it is combined with the machine learning algorithm. Sometimes we can separate machine learning algorithm as well as classifier separately. So classifier takes the input of the text image, and it will take the input from the model, which we already learned, and finally it will find out the label. So this is a general architecture of the image classification. So let us understand each steps one by one. What is its relevance? What are the different techniques available in each steps? Okay. Let us understand one by one. The first thing, once we get an image, is pre-processing. Pre-processing the images. Probably to learn these pre-processing steps, we need to understand a little bit on digital image processing. What are the different methodologies that are adopted to pre-processing? So what do you mean by pre-processing, first of all? Given an image which is captured by the camera, for example, you can see one image here. So this is an image of a cat. Okay, so you can see it is over a large background. Okay, so scenery is there in the background. So to give the image of a cat to a particular system, so we may not need the complete image. So we can crop or we can select the region of interest. So in general, we also call this as ROI. So select the region of interest. Okay. So in common terminology, I can just say that just crop the image, just crop the image for what is just required for us. So that's what makes the region of interest also. Why this is required for us? Just as simple. We are just focusing on the right part of the image, what we are interested in. That's all. And of course, this will affect the algorithm also in the later stages, because the techniques that we apply in the later stages, so that we can restrict to our region of interest only. So that sense, it is quite useful for us. So this is one part. The another part is noise removal. Usually the images captured by the camera contains several noise, knowingly or unknowingly. Maybe the problem with some illumination, maybe the problem with the lens of the camera. So like this, these are the, because of the capturing device, maybe because of the capturing device. Due to several reasons, the noise is usually a part of an image. Unless the special care is taken for capturing, noise will be a part of the image. So we need to remove the noise from the image. There are several techniques available in image processing. Of course, we need to understand the modeling, how the noise will come. So depending upon the sensors used for capturing, in the state of the art, we can find several models, the possible types of noise that will come into the image. So depending upon that, we can nullify that by doing the inverse things. Okay, so noise removal is the another part which is required. Okay, so the next thing is okay. So next thing quite important for us is something called as image enhancement. Okay, so okay, so another important thing that is required for us is the image enhancement. What do you mean by image enhancement? For example, the captured image may be dark, may be dark in nature. Maybe the captured image may be bright in nature, or the captured image may be in low contrast in nature. All three cases leads to, what is that? It is a, I can say that it is the quality of the image is very poor. How to say that it is a poor image? It's very easy actually. Quality is poor. How to say that? So maybe in this context, I can simply say that if you plot the histogram of images, so for example, you might have already knowing the image is nothing but consists of some values 0 to 255, usually 0 to 255 normal images. So 0 stands for black, 255 stands for white. So I'm talking about a grayscale image. Of course, suppose it is a color image, definitely there are 3 such planes. Now, if you simply understand if this is a grayscale image, you can see that most of the values are nearer to zeros. So if you plot an histogram, what we can observe is, if you plot an histogram, so histogram is nothing but plotting the frequency. So 0, 1, 2, up to 255 in the x-axis, and y-axis, if you just plot how many such pixels are there in the image, it is a count. So you can see the graph will go something like this. So you can see that the most of the pixels are in the range of say 0 to say 50. So we can say it's a very low contrast image. Similarly, the another image, if you take here, it's quite bright in nature. You can see that the image values, the gray level values are, most of them are in the brighter region. Similarly, here you can see that for this particular image, the image values are, pixel values are in small range actually. So all three, we can say that the quality of the image is not good. So we need to enhance this so that this quality of the image, if at all we are getting, so that will be good for us in future for understanding. So image enhancement techniques, I just explained one methodology called as one method called as histogram equalization. So that will be quite useful. So any image is given as an input, maybe this, maybe the first one, maybe the second one, or maybe the third one. Any image is given as an input for the histogram equalization. The output will be the fourth image. So this is how we can enhance the quality of the image. This is one method I just said. So image enhancement, some other methods are like, for example, here you can see one image, you can see an image from the healthcare, maybe the image of a kidney. So here you can see actually we are interested in only this part actually. So but the background is quite noisy in nature. So concept called as gray level splicing. The concept called as gray level splicing is incorporated so that to get this particular image. So this is another image enhancement technique. Okay. So there are several image enhancement techniques are available. We cannot say one method will work for all type of images. Depending upon the applications, we need to select the right method for image enhancement. Okay. And at last, I just wanted to say another pre-processing very much required for us in our image processing is resizing the images. Whatever may be the input size of the image, sometimes our algorithm, we can design for a specific size of images, say 32 cross 32 image. We want the input to always like this. So suppose if you have that restrictions and all, we need to resize the input image for the required dimensions. So these are all fall into the category of image pre-processing. Okay. The next step after image pre-processing is the feature extraction. Feature extraction, maybe I'm spending more time on this particular topic because of its importance. What do you mean by feature extraction? So in common terminology, features are nothing but which captures the unique characteristics. For example, here you can see all are chairs. Okay. So what are the common qualities of how to identify it as a chair? How we human beings identify it as a chair? So probably we can say usually they have say 4 legs. Okay, and there is a horizontal surface, I can say one horizontal surface and maybe one vertical surface. So every chair this is quite common in nature. Maybe if at all any image are having these features, I can say that it is an image. It is a chair. Okay, so this is our common understanding, how we identify a chair. Now the question is, how a computer can understand this image as a chair. For this particular aspect, we need to extract the features. we need to extract the features. For example, here I have listed a few features. For example, legs, horizontal surface, vertical surface, and all. These need to be extracted. Okay. So these need to be extracted from the image, and based upon these values, in the later stage, I can say that this is a chair. But of course, this is for just for my example. I said in real world, I think this definitely this particular features or example doesn't work actually. Now, I just wanted to say, feature is one characteristic. It is a set of characteristics that uniquely determine a particular object. Now, why the feature extraction is required? Feature extraction is very much required for us because whenever we use some machine learning algorithm, for that we need to give some input and we should get some output. Suppose the data is as small as possible, if at all you maintain, the ML algorithm will run fast. It will take little time for training. Usually what happens is the image data are slightly, we can say that image data are, whenever we are considering image as a data, the information involved in the images it is very, very large. Why? Because if you just consider an image of say 100 cross 100. 100 cross 100 image means actually it is a very small image actually, 100 cross 100. Okay, suppose if you consider a 100 cross 100 image, so you can see that there are 100 into 100 pixels are there. So each pixel usually take 1 byte. Suppose it is a color image. There are informations related to red, green, blue, RGB. So 1 byte into 3 into 100 or 10 to the power, I can say 4. So this many bytes are required, almost 3000. So almost 30,000 bytes are required to store a small image actually. Further, if the image size is large, or if at all you have the videos where several images comes per second, more than say 20 images per second, if at all we are having, the size will be too large. So usually the image size is too large to process by any machine learning or any algorithms as such. So extraction of the features is very, very important to reduce the size. This is one aspect. This is just one aspect. And another aspect is feature extraction is very, very important because you can see here the images of a chair. Here the chair image, you can see the pixel values completely different from what we can see here. What we can see the third image, this is completely different. So certain meaning has to be, similar meaning has to be taken from this so that the feature values are almost equal. For the first image, suppose if you come out with some, say, feature is extracted and you got some value, let us say 3.54. And for the second image, if you extract some value, say it should be something like 3.67. I'm just giving an hypothetical example. So the third image, it should be something like say 3.78. Then I can say this is an ideal feature extraction. So that suppose if you have a table, image of a table, for that the feature is extracted, definitely it should be something different from 3.5, 3.6, say 4.9. This is for the table as such. So feature extraction plays an important role so that whatever the diversity that we we are finding it in the input images, that is nullified during the feature extraction, and it gives a common value. Ideally, it should give the common or similar values. Suppose the images belonging to the same label. Suppose the images are belonging to the same label. Ideally, features should be very, very similar, or their values should be very, very similar in nature. That is what the expectation. Okay, so this is why the features are quite important for us. So I quoted here two things. Number one, image data as such, it is very large to process. That is one thing. Second thing is same data, if you capture the image using a camera twice, due to the lightings, illuminations and all, the content of two images are definitely it is different. What I'm talking is, suppose let us understand, you assume you have a chair. Okay, you have a chair and this chair is captured twice in the same camera. Definitely the two images whatever you are getting are definitely they are different in their values. Of course, for the human beings just to see it, it looks like similar, but ultimately their values as the matrix is concerned, it is completely different. These are the two reasons we need to extract the features from the images. And also another important aspect which we can see is there are something called as variations in the images. Let us talk about something called as intra-class variations. What exactly intra-class variations? Now let us understand here, look at this particular slide. Here you can see the images. The first part let us focus on. Okay, so here what we can see is there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 images, okay, of the same person. 6 images of the same person. If you consider image 1 and image 2, of course it is an image of the same person, particularly the face. You can see that there is a change in the illumination. Content is same, I mean the person is same, it belongs to the same class, but the images are differ in illumination. If you consider the image number 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, if you consider, you can see that the images are having different expressions. If you consider the 6th image, you can see that there is a difference in the angle of capturing. We call it as a force. It is different in force. But what we can see is all 6 images belong to the person X. Okay, all 6 images belongs to the person X, or it belongs to the same label X, same label. So in total, what we can say is there exist something called as intra-class variations. Apart from what is listed here, illumination, face, and facial expressions, force, there are also possibility. There is also possibility of invariance. I mean, variance in scale, variance in transformations. Okay, maybe translation. Maybe the images are differ in rotation. So all three together we call it as transformations. So maybe the images are rotated, maybe the images are scaled up, scaled down. Okay, so all these are also possible in addition to these three. So so in general, in summary, I can just say that there exist high variations between the images that belong to the same class. That belongs to the same class. So our feature extraction methodology should address all these issues. Even though there are variations in several images, the feature extraction technique ideally should extract the features in such a way that it should get the similar features. Similar features. Ideally, same features, but ideally thing won't happen in nature. So ideally, then we can say that feature extraction technique should extract the similar, very, very similar features for the images that belongs to the same class. That is very, very important fact. Additionally, these feature extraction techniques should give different values for the images that belongs to the different class. Suppose if you have an image that belongs to the class I, okay, that belongs to the class I, and that belongs to the class J. For example, here you can see image of US President George W. Bush, junior as well as senior one. So they actually two different persons, but looks ideally same. Okay, so our feature extraction technique should come out with good methodology such a way that for two different persons, it should give two different values. Okay, or the another thing is like, suppose there are two twins. Okay, two twins. For class, this is belong to the class I and this is belong to the class J. The feature extraction technique, ideally, it should give different features for these two people. So basically, we need to address during the feature extraction technique, we need to address two things. Number one, it should handle intra-class variations, and also it should handle inter-class similarities. Okay, intra-class, even though there are intra-class variations, the features should be same for the same class. Suppose there is a inter-class similarities, our feature extraction technique should give the different features because these two images belong to the different persons. So this is the reason the feature extraction technique is very, very important. Okay, now what are the types of features? Anyway, I'm not going to explain all the features exhaustively. I just mention few of the features which can be used for the feature extraction. Suppose the images are something like, say, black and white, or it consists of only the shapes. Maybe we can use some of the geometric features, which captures the corners, edges, lines, curves, and some interest points, or a region of a small region from the given image. We call it as blobs or ridges and so on. This is one type of features. Suppose the images consist of some of the shapes. Okay, let us say the image consists of a shape. So maybe suppose there are many techniques available to capture the shape features. Means these shape features will remain same even though this image is rotated, scaled, translated, and so on. So the shape features are same. For example, you just take the ratio of major axis and minor axis, length as well as width. If you take the ratio of that, okay, so that is one feature which is even though it is scaled or rotated or translated, the shape feature remains same. So there are several such features are available in the literature. Okay, this is for a specific application, but most of the things that we can see, the raw images, whatever we can see, usually textures are a part of it. For example, what I have shown here, it is nothing but regions that contain several textures. Textures are nothing but maybe some colors, some color patterns that are repeating. Okay. So in the literature, there are many texture features that are available. One such feature I'm going to discuss in detail, maybe in the coming 2-3 slides, moments. Okay. So before going to the next slide, I also wanted to highlight on another broad classification of the features, which is called as global feature and local features. In the literature, we can also see this as a local descriptors or global descriptors in nature. Okay, what do you mean by local descriptor and global descriptor? Suppose the whole image is given an input and we are computing a feature vector, some values, we are computing it. Okay, for whole image, we are representing as, let us say, it is a vector of, say, 5 values. So that's what we call it as a global feature. The whole image is represented as a vector. Maybe one-dimensional vector, maybe two-dimensional vector. So, and so on. Okay, so we are applying the technique to the whole image as such. Okay, so the moments, that's what I am going to discuss later. So that belongs to this particular category actually. It is a global feature. We are applying for the whole image. Now, so this is one way of getting the features from the given image. The another method of extracting the features from the given image is using the local features. What do you mean by local features? Local features means from the given image, we identify certain points. For the given image, we identify certain points. We call this as interesting points or key points. For the given image, we try to find out some key points. Okay, which is also called as interesting point or key point. And this key point, for this particular key point, let us say x1, y1, is described by a particular vector, feature vector. So this point is described by feature vector. So for example, for this image, whatever I am shown here, let us say 5 interesting points are found, x1, y1, x2, y2, say x5, y5. These are the 5 y5. These are the 5 points that are extracted. So we will get 5 different feature vectors. Okay. So these 5 points describe this particular image. So this is what we call it as local features. How to extract the key points, how to describe it by vectors, descriptors. Of course, maybe again it is a large. It will take large amount of time. So just I wanted to say that some of the most common features that are used are, earlier it started with something called as a SIFT, scale invariant feature transform. Then another popular one is SURF. Okay, so speeded up robust features. There are many are available. Okay, DAISY. There are many other features also available in the literature. So these are called as local features. Okay. Now, so there are different types of features based upon their things. We can classify based upon geometric shape and texture. And also the another classification is majorly on local and global. Okay, now how we can say that it is a good feature? I already mentioned it. We can say that a feature is a good feature if it is invariant to transformations. Invariant to transformations. So let us understand, I won't get into too technical. I just wanted to show there exists some such features which is invariant. Okay, for example, if you consider I is an image, let us say this is x-axis and this is y-axis. Okay, so I of x, y, so this gives one single pixel, value of the one single pixel, value of the pixel, gray level values. Okay, suppose if you come out with this particular formula, which will give you something called as a moment, giving various values for I and j, say, let us start from say m00, m01, m11, you will get different equations like this. So just use this formula, for computation of one value, which is called as moment. Okay, fine. So we can get one value here for maybe m00 will get, m11 will get, and so on. For every values of ij, we will get some values. Now, of course, this is not invariant to anything, but these can be modified so that it is translation invariant. What we are supposed to do? Compute a value x dash, x bar, y bar, which is computed by this particular formula, which is called as the centroid, and modify the above equation by subtracting each x and y with x bar, y bar. So now whatever you can get, it is translation invariant. What do you mean by translation invariant? Suppose if you have an image where the person image is there at the one corner, and assume you have another image where person is existing, same person exists in say another corner. For these two images, if you compute these central moments, the values that you will get is same. For example, for this one, if you compute, you will get 1.23. For this also, you will get 1.23. This is what we call it as invariant to translation. So this is what we call it as central moment. Further, this central moments can be modified slightly so that it can be made as invariant to scale. What do you mean by invariant to scale? Suppose the same image is represented in a small region, or it is represented in a broad region. Okay, its scale is increased or decreased. Still you will get the same value, 1.23. So this is what we call it as scale invariant. Further, in the literature, we can find several such methods. So a person called as who proposed a modification for this particular moments, which is called as translation, scale, rotation, and reflection invariant. So he is given 7 values actually. 7 values based upon these values. Based upon the normalized central moments, 7 values are computed by this, of course, a complex formula. So ultimately, we are getting 7 moments. So probably you can appreciate what is the importance of these 7 moments. So look at this particular diagram. So this is the one given image. You can see here the different versions of the image. For example, this is the translated version of it. Same image, half size. This is the same image, but it is mirrored in the y-axis. Okay, vertical it is reflected, I can say. So mirrored image, and this is the image which is got from rotating 45 degrees. Here is an image which is rotated 90 degrees. Now, let us compute the moments proposed by who. 7 such moments. Of course, in the earlier notation, it is H1, H2, H3. Now it is just written as M1 to M7. Compute that 7 moments for the original image. So you can see these are the values that is got. 2.8, 7.1, 10.4, and so on. 7 values we got. But the same moments, if you compute for all the other images, which is nothing but the transformed version of the original image. All other images, all other 5 images that we are getting, you can see that the values what we are getting, it is exactly, almost exactly same as the original one. So what I'm trying to say is, if at all you capture the scene or an object, say in the training phase, you got this image, and during the evaluation phase, you got a rotated version of it, say 45 degrees. If you compute the features, 7 features, something like this, you can see that the features are exactly same. The features are exactly same. So probably I can say this is one very, very nice feature, which very good, very well works on these particular images. Of course, this is not the state of the art. Actually, this particular moments are proposed long back. Long back. Of course, even though it works for this still images, but most of the real-time applications that we are seeing nowadays, definitely this won't work that much. So this is not the ideal case where we can stop. Since the images, just for the demonstration purpose, I have shown you this particular scenario. What do you mean by invariance? That doesn't mean that this is the time to stop. We need to come out with, for different applications, this may not work actually. Okay, for this application it works, doesn't mean that it should work for all the applications. So we need to go ahead with some other features. So how we can capture some other features? For example, given an image, we need to capture the edges. Suppose let us say, based upon the edges, I can based upon the session, what is that? Edges, I can select it. So then maybe I can extract something called as the edge features. Based upon the lines you can determine, definitely then you can go for extraction of the lines. So like this, different set of features based upon our understanding of that particular input images, we can extract it. All these extraction of the features is done by something called as a process called as convolution. A process called as convolution. What do you mean by convolution then? Let us understand in a very simple way. Okay, let us understand it in a very simple way. Consider this is one image. This is the image. Let us say consider it input image. Say this is what I call it as filter. There are different terminologies for this: filter, kernel. Okay, there are different terms are here used. This particular input image is convolved or filtered with this filter. How to do that? So probably this particular diagram explains that. So you have to keep this particular filter or mask at the top of this particular image and multiply the respective elements. Multiply the respective elements. Okay. So upon multiplication, whatever the elements you are getting, upon multiplying, you'll get some values. Then add them together. So for example, you can see here filter value, here it is 1, here it is 0, here it is 1, here it is 0, 1, say 0, 1, 0, 1. So you can see that 1 here, another 1 here, another 1 here, okay, another 1 here. So 4 ones are we are getting, add them together so that you will get this value. See, once you get one value, then move the filter to the next position. That's what you can see in yellow color. Move the filter all over the image and do this. So upon doing this, you will get some values. So this is what the convolved feature. Okay, we call it as feature map. Okay, or we can say that filtered image, filtered responses. Okay, so this is the mathematics behind the convolution. Very, very simple mathematics. Okay, just keep the mask at the top of the image. Okay, do the multiplication and perform the addition of the results. So it will give you one single pixel value of the resultant image. Do this by sliding the filters at, left to right, top to bottom. Okay, you will get the convolved image. So what I'm trying to say is, for the given image, say this is the input image I, if you convolve with, say the filter GX, this one, this will give you the horizontal edges. This is what the horizontal edges. Suppose the given image I, if it is convolved with this particular filter, let us say GY, so you will get this edge. So this is what the this is what the horizontal edge, and this is what the vertical edge. If you combine these two results together, so you will get the edge image. So I just wanted to say, extracting the edge features are nothing but convolution by a filter whose values are this. This is fixed. Okay, this is what we call it as a Roberts operator. Okay, this is fixed. This is a very special operator to extract the edges. It's a 3x3 filter whose values are, I mean, you can see here. Okay, so this is specially used for extracting the edge features. Okay, now what are the other things that we can do? If you change this particular mask, you will get different features. For example, if the mask is something like this, and if it is applied on the input image, this one, you'll get these responses. Or if the mask is this one, you'll get this response. This is point extraction, actually, edge detection. So you'll get this response. Similarly, there are many features that are available. Now the question is, why it is just a 3x3 filter? No, need not be. We can have the filter sizes anything like usually odd in number, maybe 5x5, maybe 5x3. That is also okay. So that depends upon our interest, how we extract the features. Just for explanation purpose, I just given 3x3, but you can expand this as you want. Okay. Further, there are many untold things which I have not discussed behind the operation of these convolutions. Okay, that maybe you can explore this. Fine. Now, is it only the masks that are simple masks? Is these simple masks or filters are enough for us for the feature extraction? Definitely not. These are the simple, very simple things. Based upon these responses of the original images, it won't fit into our what we call it as ideal feature extraction technique. These responses are not sufficient, definitely not sufficient. These are some of the responses, that's all. These are some of the features I can see. So may not be suitable for any good application. So if you move on in the literature, what we can see is ultimately different types of kernels or marks or filters are used. Different types of filters are used. Okay. So one such filters that we can use, what I am showing in the next slide, is something called as a Gabor filters. Okay. So probably you can see here how it looks like. So here you can see 4 into 6 filters, 4 rows, 6 columns. Each one is different filter it is. Okay. Now, of course, filter in earlier examples I have given the values, but here then there is no value. That means whatever here you can see as bright in color, you can say that the values are very nearer to 255 and quite dark, very dark, then we can say that usually they are normalized. So maybe you can say that high values are nothing but 1. Very dark values are nothing but -1, I can. So the values are in the range of 0 to or -1. Okay, bright and dark, you can map the values to in between 0 to -1. These are the filter values. That's what you can see. Okay, now what you can observe here is second column. It is another direction, 45 degrees, sorry, 30 degrees. This is 60 degrees, say 90 degrees rotation of the original one. Similarly, the rotated versions of it. So all 6 things, what you can see, 6 columns represent 6 directions. Similarly, the filters are designed in different scales. You can see that the filters are designed in different scales. So ultimately, it is nothing but a 2x2 matrix. Every filter here, sorry, n cross n matrix, 2-dimensional matrix it is. That's all. How these values are got? So these values are based upon different parameters. The ith row, say ith row, jth column, xy, xth row and yth column can be got by, see, this is what we can see that it gives this wave-like responses. Okay, so if you put these values here for fixing these values, okay, so please you can try to understand here, this is the wavelength, this is the theta, that is the direction, theta is equal to 0 here, say theta is equal to 90 degree here, and so on. Okay, similarly the standard deviations, so all these things, there are different parameters. So based upon the different parameters, by setting the parameters, we can design this. Now what is important for me is, given image should be convolved or filtered by using these filters, get the feature responses. Maybe you can concatenate them and represent it as a feature vector. So this particular topic, you can find something called as wavelets. Wavelet based filtering, we can extract good features, very good features. Okay, so this is another thing that I have taken from some other literature. So what I'm trying to summarize is, in feature extraction, we can adopt the methodologies as simple as moments, or we can go for some extractions like edges from the images. We can use the edges, or you can go ahead with some features that are the responses by convolving with some of the kernels like Gabor wavelet. This is what we call it as a Gabor wavelet. Okay, so that is what in summary I just wanted to say. One most important thing that you have to remember at this moment is, feature extraction is done by using the filtering operation. That is the one line that you have to remember that we are using in the deep learning in the later stages. Okay, so I just wanted to repeat this statement. Feature extraction, most of the feature extraction techniques are just based upon filtering or convolution operation. Filter values that we need to decide the good mask or filter values so that it will extract good features for us. That is a very important thing. Identification of good values in our filters is the most challenging one. That is what the research problem. Okay. So with that, I just wanted to quickly go through the next steps. Usually the feature extraction technique will give you with the features with high dimension, say 1 to 10,000, say feature vector of 1 to 10,000. So directly we cannot give the this to the machine learning algorithm. Definitely it should be short-turned so that maybe we can put the feature vectors in terms of 1 to 1000. Okay, that's all. So maybe there are several dimensionality reduction techniques are available. One commonly used one is principal component analysis, or there are many other methods available to eliminate the features. Irrelevant features we can eliminate. So one broad algorithm is given here. Anyway, I am not spending much time on this. Okay, so this is what dimensionality reduction is. Okay, so once the dimensionality reduction is done, then the very important factor of machine learning is identification of the classifiers. What do you mean by exactly? What do you mean by classifier? Basically, the classifier, the job is, let us say we have some features, say in x and y directions. Okay, two-dimensional feature, let us say x and y. And if you plot it in the graph, if at all you can see that, if you plot it in the graph, the samples belonging to, let us say, class 1, it falls here. Class 2 falls here, let us say, ideal case. Then classifier is the one, if you give some unknown value, say f is a classifier for us, say unknown value, so say unknown image, let us say I. So it should give me either 1 or 2, depending upon where this image falls into. Suppose this image fall into the category of 1, it should give me 1, otherwise it should give me 2. Ideally, it will separate, this function will separate these two values. Okay, so I mean these two classes it will separate. Of course, there are many challenges. In a very simple way, I explained what exactly the classifier is. Depending upon the features and depending upon the applications, we need to choose the classifier for our problem. Okay, why it is important? Of course, why it is important? Let me tell you. For example, let us say, consider the input data is something like this. Let us say the input data is something like this. You can see all the red dots, it is something like in this region, and all the blue dots are remaining. Suppose if you use a classifier which linearly separates, then ultimately you can draw a line to separate, red and blue. So linear classifier for this particular data may not be good. So understanding of the feature vectors, which space it falls into, that is more important for us. So we have to choose a good classifier for this particular data. Okay, so this is what the overall understanding of the classifiers. There are many classifiers that are available. One very simple classifier, which is called as a nearest neighbor classifier. Strictly speaking, it is also called as a lazy learning because there is no training happens in the nearest neighbor classifier. There are many other classifiers also, navigation classifiers, decision tree classifiers. Here you can see the decision tree classifiers and the extended version of the decision trees, which is called as random forest classifiers. We also have logistic regression based classifiers, support vector machines classifiers, and so on. And also we can combine all these classifiers at some level and we can design our own classifier. We call this as ensemble methods. Again, so one key point that we have to remember is do not blindly stick on to one classifier, for example, k nearest neighbor classifier, because it is easy. No, we have to visualize the data. We have to analyze the data based upon that and based upon the knowledge of what type of classifications does by the classifier, we need to apply it. It is not blindly applying a particular classifier and getting the result. For example, here you can see the data is separated by a circle. Definitely you cannot use a linear classifier which classifies something like this. So this best that is a thing that you have to remember while coming across the classifiers. Okay, so here I have shown you some of the results of the classifiers. Probably you can see here. Few points I just wanted to say. Here the data is distributed something like this, whereas the data here is separated by a circle. But here you can see it is almost separated by a line. So in that sense, the linear classifier is sufficient for this particular data, the third data. Maybe we have to go for some better methods, kernel-based methods for the second data where circular nature of separation is required. So depending upon the data values, we need to go ahead with the classifiers. Of course, it is not an easy job because it is not as easy as whatever the data I have shown here is a 2-dimension in nature, but in reality, the data is in n dimensions. So it's quite a difficult job. Yeah, so going ahead, we have something called as once the classifier is decided, how we need to go ahead with the data set. How we can apply this data set, divide the data set and go ahead with the learning. Okay, so usually what we do is we split the data set into two, maybe 80% for the training and 20% for the testing. It should be mutual exclusive. But okay, this, or we can go ahead with a 70%, 30% ratio also. But it should all depends on, but one thing you have to remember here, we have some metric called as recognition accuracy, how well our algorithm works. If you go ahead with this particular method, definitely it all depends upon the 20% of the data that is used here. So accuracy may not be the right measure in that sense. Means accuracy computed like this is not an effective one. So what else we can do? There is something called as a k-fold cross validation. That is a good method for computing the accuracy. So what we do here is the whole data set we divide into k. Let us say 1, 2, 3. Say k is equal to 4. Whole data set I divide into 4. This is what my data set. I divide into 4. So what we do is, once in a simple notation I will do it. So divide into 4. Now what we do is in the iteration 1, this slot is taken for testing, remaining are taken for training. This is for testing and remaining for training. In the iteration 2, the second block is selected for testing and remaining is selected for training. Iteration 3, third block is selected for testing, remaining are chosen for training. Like this we do it. So we'll get, say, k number of accuracies. K number of accuracies we'll get at each iteration, then find out the average. So this is a very good measure of finding out the accuracies. This is most important because whenever we say our algorithm is 80% works well, 80% is accuracy, how that 80% is got, that is also most important for us. So good splitting of the data is also very much important. Anyway, as a time restriction, because I need to cover another topic called as deep learning, convolution neural network, I will just go quickly. So based upon the values, whatever we are getting, actual values and predicted values, how many went correct? So that's what based upon that values we are computing accuracy. So true positive, true negative. So these are the ideal case of correct classification. Remaining leads to the incorrect classification. And this matrix, we call this as confusion matrix. Okay, so based upon the confusion matrix, we can compute the accuracy. Very simple it is. Diagonally, you just add it 50 plus 100. So it is 150 divided by the total number of samples. So this gives the accuracy actually. Apart from that, we have the error rate, 1 minus accuracy. We have precision and recall, and also precision and recall clubbed together to give the F1 measure. Okay, so this is, I just go quickly. Okay. Suppose if you have multi-class classifications, in that case, you have to compute the precision and recall for the individual classes. Okay, now the important aspect of deep learning approach, how we can address this issue, whatever we have done so far, how we can address this using a deep learning approach. Anyway, I will just focus my discussion on maybe next 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I will just explain the concept behind deep learning approach for the image classification, particularly on convolution neural networks, because we have some other sessions in future which have the detailed discussion on that. But I just wanted to give an introduction or the understanding of how the convolution neural network is evolved. Okay. Now, coming back, I just wanted to continue from here itself. We have already seen the general architecture for the image classification using this. Now, what is challenging, as I told you earlier, what is challenging here is, for our application, we need to identify a right feature extractor. We need to identify a right feature extraction technique so that it classifies our unseen images correctly. Ideally, 100% correct classification. So the most important thing here is the feature extraction, because whatever may be the input image, of course, each step contributes in its own way, but the most important thing is the feature extraction, because it nullifies many things. As I listed earlier, suppose there is a variance in the images, so feature extraction techniques nullifies everything and gives a similar value. So choosing a right feature extraction technique is the most important thing in the research area in the machine learning. Maybe if most of the researchers in 90s, in 80s, in machine learning mainly deals with identifying a right feature for that particular application of interest. Identifying a right feature for the application of interest. Maybe face recognition, face images, iris images, maybe objects, some other objects, all those things. Okay. Now, once the neural networks comes into picture in this decade, maybe last 15 years, what happened is all these stages are replaced by one particular model called as deep learning or artificial neural networks. Feature extraction, machine learning algorithm, classification, everything is replaced by one particular technique called as convolutional neural network. Okay, so this is this idea that we have to remember now. Simply, if you study the convolution network without understanding the background of the earlier feature extraction technique, it will be incomplete. So what exactly the convolution neural network does? Let us understand it. Okay. Now, this particular slide gives you a broad architecture of a two-layer artificial neural network. First one called as input layer. It is just an input, nothing to do with actually, just an input. No processing happens. Processing happens in the second layer. This is layer 2. Okay. This is another layer. This is another layer. Processing actually happens at this layer called as hidden layer, another layer called as output layer. So in together we can call it as this as a two-layer network. These types of networks are evolved based upon the ideology of neurons, how they are interconnected in our brains. Now, focusing on the computing aspects at each neuron, whatever we call this as a perceptron actually. Okay, so these, what exactly internal processing everyone does here is nothing but, for example, let us consider one here. So it is nothing but it takes the input from several things, and several inputs it takes, okay, and it say these inputs are, let us say x1, x2, just for understanding, x3, x4, x5. So these are given as an input, and this associates the weights for this W1, W2, W3, W4, W5. X are multiplied by W. X are multiplied by W. You can see here in the diagram. You can see in the diagram here. Okay, all X's are multiplied by corresponding W, and their summation is done. X1 W1 plus X2 W2 plus and so on. So Xn Wn. This summation is done. Respective elements are multiplied and their summation is done. Now, once the summation is done, it is given as an input to something called as an activation function. So activation function, it's just a function, and finally it will give an output. So that output will be here. What exactly an activation function? Let us understand. Activation function outputs are, some of the examples for the activation functions are, you can see here. For example, sometimes the activation function is, suppose X is an input, activation function is given as, okay, it is a function f of X, it is nothing but max of 0, X. It means the output is nothing but 0 if the value of input is less than 0. Output is 0 if the value of input is less than 0, and it is same as X, identity, it is same as X if it is greater than 0. We call this as rectified linear unit activation function. This is one activation function. There are many as such, for example, sigmoid activation function. Suppose if you give some X, it will give you 1 by 1 plus e to the power minus X as an activation function. Okay, I won't discuss much on this. I just wanted to say, this is the one which is quite popular in deep learning. Okay, it simply nullifies the negative values to 0. That's all. Positive values remains as it is. Negative values remains 0. Usually in neural network, all the values are normalized to 0 to 1. So whatever I told you in the earlier slide, all these X, W, all are in between 0 to 1. Okay, so this is about the brief understanding of the neural network. So this computation, whatever the neuron perceptron computation, whatever I have told here, okay, this happens at every node. Okay, every layer, every node, except the input one. This is just an input. Okay, so this is the broad architecture of the neural network. Now let us understand. Suppose if you consider input as an image, because my focus here is image. My focus is an image. Whatever I have shown you earlier is just a number here. Okay, numbers are inputted. Now just think of input layer is an image. It is nothing but several values that we are giving from the input. Just imagine. Also, so the first layer are nothing but input. Now, let us consider the next layer as a filter values. For example, 3 cross 3 means it is 9 values will be there. 9 values will be there. So let us have 9 values here. So what you can observe here is these are interconnected to each other. So there are some weights corresponding to this. Now these weights are nothing but the value of the filter. These weights are nothing but the value of the filter. So ultimately, when the neural network, there is a data passes from one layer to the another layer, actually, we can simulate the convolutions. We can simulate the convolutions. That is what more important here. So earlier what we have done is we designed the filter values. And applied on the image. Then we got the responses called as features. Now what happens is the weights of the artificial neural network is nothing but the filter values, mask values. Now, okay, so there exist some filters here which is not shown here. Okay, that is how the output is given as this. So given an input image, given with several filters, okay, we will get the convolution result. And its dimension is overcome by a concept called as pooling. Okay, by the concept called as pooling. And this is what we call one layer in CNN architecture. Convolution and pooling gives you one. Several such layers will be accumulated depending upon our methodology. Then finally we have something called as fully connected layer, and that are connected to the output layer. Output layer are purely dependent upon how many labels we have. Suppose if we have 3 labels, then we have 3 nodes here. So in the later stage, if the input image is belonging to the, say, class 3, then this value will be approximately 0.99, and remaining these values will be 0.01 or 0.01. So this is what the values we will get at the end. Okay, my focus here, okay. So my focus here is just to how this convolution is developed here. Okay. Now, moving on. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is the slide is visible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, fine. So my focus here is, as I shown you earlier, input image here, the first phase, and there will be many convolution layers followed by pooling layers, and finally one fully connected layer and output layer. Okay, this is what the overall architecture of the convolution neural network. So here is one example. You can see there is a digit classification. This is what one convolution layer. This is the convolution filters. These are the result. Another set of filters, result, and finally fully connected layer, output layer. Now the focus is how the deep learning approach. This approach is different from the machine learning. How the deep learning approach is different from the machine learning is, I have told you there are several filter values. There are several filters here that gives this result. In machine learning, we used to manually fix the values of these filters. Now, in deep learning, during the training process, the values of these filters are automatically determined. This is a very, very important factor in the convolution neural network or in deep learning in general. So the burden of identifying a good feature, the burden of identifying a good feature extraction technique now is given to the algorithm itself. We need not bother about this. This is the main reason. This is the main reason the deep learning or convolution neural networks are highly popular. Whatever I said earlier, edge extraction, say Gabor filters, all dependent upon my choice. Now, the neural network will decide which value it wants. Actually, manually, it is quite difficult to interpret these values actually. Depending upon to minimize the errors, it will modify the values of these particular weights or values of these filters such a way that it will fine tune everything so that the classification happens accurately. So this is what the core idea behind the convolution neural networks. Okay. So I just wanted to focus. Okay, that is about the one part, the filtering part. The another part I would like to say is pooling. In convolution neural network, once you convert the image, you will get a larger image. Let us say we get an image of 4x4. Now I need to reduce its size. One broadly accepted methodology which is called as pooling. What we do is we just move a mask. We just move a mask at the top of this particular features and the maximum is selected. The maximum among all these 4 values, that is nothing but 6. Next, move that mask. We call it as a stride 2x2, means I am moving by 2 columns and 2 rows. So next, I select 8. Next, I move so that I will select maximum 1, 3, 4. Similarly, we have something called as the min value. So different values of pooling. So most adopted values methodology is the max pooling. So this is how the dimensionality reduction is achieved. I just wanted to show you one diagram also here. So probably you can understand how these feature responses you can see. For example, the given image is a face image. Okay, the face image in RGB. Okay, so which is a 152 cross 3. Now, when it is convolved by different, say 32 filters of 11 cross 11 cross 11 filters. How many such filters? 32 such filters I am using it, 11 cross 11. So probably you can see the output is something like this. 11 cross 11 filters values are determined by the algorithm itself. I am not fixing it. But what I am fixing is it is 11 cross 11. It is the developer choice. Okay. So then upon pooling, you will get this one. So this is what one layer in deep learning. Further, this is another layer. And this is further, this is another layer. And so on. Finally, there is a fully connected layer. And finally, it gives the value. So this is the interpretation of the features. Yeah, that's all I would like to say with respect to the CNN architecture. There are further some issues also, something called as augmentation or fitting dropouts. I will just skip as there is a limitation in the time because I need to show one demonstration. Okay, now I will just go to the demonstration. Can you see the screen, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, it is visible.
So, okay.
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to show you one demonstration on convolution neural network based image classification, how it can be developed. I just wanted to say at this particular point of time, this code is not developed by me. It is developed by Google Colab. Okay. That is a disclaimer I would like to say. Okay, so there are several platforms that are available. There are several platforms that are available to develop the deep learning approaches. Okay, so one such methodology by using the Python. Okay, by using Python, and in Python we can use TensorFlow libraries developed by Google. Okay, there we have something called as TensorFlow is nothing but a way of handling the matrices. We call it as tensors. There we can use a particular package called as Keras that can be utilized to develop the convolutional neural networks. Okay, so this is a just introduction. So now coming to the execution part, what I am showing you as of now is Google Colab. Google Colab, it is an online platform for the execution of the Python codes, particularly machine learning, deep learning codes we can execute. The one advantage of this particular platform is it is free, certain extent it is free, and we can get the GPU access freely. That's another important factor. For the beginners, definitely it is those who don't have the good hardware, because to run the deep learning applications, to go for the training, it consumes time, much computation is required at the training phase. So maybe we can use Google Colab for this particular purpose. So I'm using Google Colab here. So here is a notebook related to the Google Colab. The first, what we can see is we need to import the TensorFlow and also the required libraries for that. Now the data set, of course, we can use some existing data set. Suppose if you are using for your application, definitely you can get the data set. You can read the data set, which is there in the Google Drive. Okay, that also we can do here actually. Okay, let me run all the code at a time, because just to save time. So first we need to import the libraries, then just import the data set. I am going to show you now the one object recognition demonstration. Basically here, there is a data of images belonging to 10 classes: aeroplane, automobile, bird, cat, deer, dog, frog, horse, ship, and truck. Okay, this is the data set, which is the CIFAR 10 data set, comparatively a small data set. Okay, so we can plot it using the Python code. We can plot it. So this is what the images looks like. This is randomly taken one. Okay, so labels are nothing but their categories, okay, class names. Now, okay, now important factor here is we need to build our convolution neural network. So we can use a class called as sequential and create an object belonging to the class, say, let us say model. Then add the first layer. The first layer is a convolution layer. It is a 2D convolution. So we are selecting here 3x3 filters, 32 such filters in the first layer. Please understand here, layer means it is a combination of convolution and pooling. Okay, so here line whatever I highlighted it forms a first layer. So convolution is done by 3x3 matrix. 32 such matrices, filters will be selected. The activation function is the ReLU. That's what I shown you earlier. And it is a special layer where the input is taken directly from the image. So what is the size of the input? That is what we have to mention. So size of the input is 32. 32 cross 32 means 32 rows, 32 columns, and RGB channel, that is 3 channels. Please note here, 32 in the convol 3D, in the filter, nothing to do with the 32 in the input shape. These are completely two different things. Okay, once it is done, the convolution is done, then we have to go for the pooling. So pooling is by a size of 2 cross 2, as I shown you earlier. So this forms one layer in this particular deep learning architecture. The second layer, it is again, here it is convolution again, and it is a 3 cross 3 filter. But here we have 64 such filters. In the second layer of the deep learning, 64 such things are available. So that is what we can see here. And the third one, it is just convolution by, it is just a convolution by 3 cross 3 matrix. I mean filters, 64 such things. If you want, you can avoid also. There is no max pooling. If you want, you can embed max pooling also. So this is a partially built summary you can see here. So summary will give you how the architecture is built. And most important thing is, you can see the parameters numbers here. This will give you how many such filter values are there, so that it will be trained. These are the weights are updated during training. Or in simple terminology, I can say that these parameter values are the values of the filters. That's all. In simple understanding, these parameter values belongs to the filter values in our machine learning convention. Okay, so this is what the data. This is what the 3 layers, and the 2 things that is pending, which is adding the last 2 layers. Okay, so finally we are doing the flattening it. Okay, whatever the 3 cross 3 layers, whatever we have. Okay, finally have the final network. So this is the final network that it is built here. Okay, so the summary, that is what you can see. And compilation, so please understand, we need to compile the model first, then we need to go for call the function called as model.fit. So this function will give you, will do the real training. You can specify the epochs. So how many iterations it need to be done. So if as the iterations are more and more, the values of the filters are parameters are fine and fine, so that it will give you the good classification. Okay, I already run it, so it will take some time for running. At some point, I just wanted to say here 2 values. So hope you can see here. There are 2 things you can see here. Accuracy is 0.4, value accuracy is 0.5. At the end, you can see that accuracy is 0.7, val accuracy is 0.7. What is the meaning of these 2 things? So please, you have to understand this in because most of the times we will mislead with these values. So what happened now is the whole data set is given for training. Okay, and some data set we kept it for testing. Now among the training, to update the values, a portion of the data set which is called as validation data set. Okay, testing is done using validation data set. Testing is also done by the same data set which is used for the training. So here accuracy means, what you can see accuracy here, this is nothing but the values got from training data set. This is the one which is got from the validation data set. Okay, so the training is done. So once the training is done, next, if I want to plot how the training goes on and went on, so you can see by using this particular graph. So you can see that earlier the accuracy is low. So because we have only 10 iterations, at the 10th iteration we are able to get say 0.87 is a, 0.70 is the almost accuracy. Okay, so this is how the training happened and how the testing happened. It gives the result. Later we can predict, if you give a single image, I have not shown here. If you give a single image, it will predict the correct label of a given image. So this is about a simple demonstration. I'm not taken much time on the demonstration because concept understanding behind the convolution neural network is very important compared to the compared to this one. This code is freely available in Google Colab. In Google Colab tutorial, this code is already available with comments. It is a very nice tutorial. You can just go through. Okay, so this is about the demonstration part of it. Now coming to the slides again as a. Okay, so we can see several methods for implementing this. As I shown you, I have used the Python based execution, which uses certain libraries, as well as I used Google Colab for that. You can use, if at all, if you have GPUs, then you can install Anaconda and you can execute all the things. Apart from that, if at all, some implementation inputs I have given here. If you are interested, you can see this. Those who are the beginners, maybe suppose your institution is having purchased MATLAB, then very easily we can do these things using MATLAB also. Because MATLAB supports the image processing as well as the statistics and machine learning toolbox, as well as the deep learning toolbox. Very quickly, within few lines of code, you can achieve all these things, whatever I said. Or if you are interested in, as most of them are, in open source, we can go for Python. Definitely, it is a very nice way of doing it. Number of codes, libraries, number of learning materials are available for this particular purpose. Yeah, so that's all from my end. I hope I have given sufficient details for the beginners to start the research in image classification. Thank you. Thank you one and all for your patience listening. I am not seeing the chat box. Okay. So anyway, if I am not answered your queries anyway, please pardon me. Finally, I just wanted to thank all the organizers, conveners for providing me an opportunity. Thank you one and all. If any questions are there, maybe within the time limit, we can answer. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was really a very wonderful and informative session. We got a lot of things to learn.
Amruta madam, your voice is very low. Amruta madam?
Yes, sir.
Your voice thoda.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.